Mr. Mark Larry, Mr. James Campus.
Here.
Mr. Scott Bansky.
Here.
Mr. Greg Marcus. Ms. Gisella.
Here.
Okay, great. First order of business, as usual, discussion, any discussion, and the approval of the meeting minutes from our meeting in January on the 12th. Do we have any discussion? Seek a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Great. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. Next order of business is Mr. Marsh with our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Today's financial update includes a review of the year-to-date income statement through January, as well as our fiscal year and forecast. We'll also review several financial exhibits pertaining to the expansion project. Before we get into the numbers, however, just a quick reminder that the next committee meeting in May, Baker Tilly will be presenting to you the 22 audited financial statements. And on that topic, some of you may recall that pursuant to guidance issued by GASB under statement number 87, the district will be implementing in 22 new accounting treatment pertaining to leases. The primary impact of this accounting treatment will be on the balance sheet. It should not affect how the district ultimately measures its net income. Because the district issues comparative financial statements, meaning we compare side by side 2 fiscal years of financial data, we will be required to restate some of the numbers from 21 as part of the 22 financial statements. Baker Tilly will speak more on this topic at the May committee meeting. Of course, if there's any questions on this matter, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly.
I'm just verifying that even though we're not seeing it, that we are up and available.
Okay, good. Okay, well, let's get into the financial packet here. We're going to start with the year-to-date financials, which are summarized on page 5 and have column IDs A, B, C, and D at the top. Starting with line 65, column C, you can see we are expected to exceed, or we did exceed budget net income by $529K in January. Much of this positive variance is driven by line 35, interest income. Most of the income in this category is a result of earnings on the district's expansion project funds. Last committee meeting in January, when we touched on this category for our year-end 22 review, there was some discussion on how project income, restricted income, and unrestricted income were commingled together into the income statement. Later on in today's report, we'll review an exhibit that segregates these line items into the relevant fund categories. But before we leave this exhibit, a couple other notes. District's net operating income, line 28, is down relative to budget for January, largely a result of line 18, utilities. There's a sizable variance here. Much of that is driven by an underallocation of expense within our budget for this particular month. This underallocation is offset in latter months, so I would expect to see this variance decrease as we progress throughout the fiscal year. You'll also see that lines 3 and 4, labor revenue and food and beverage revenue respectively, are down relative to budget. Some of that is a result of actualizing less blue sky events in January than were budgeted. After reviewing the remainder of the event calendar, we do believe there are opportunities later in the year to make that up, provided we can work around planned renovations of the existing building. It's a puzzle we're still putting together and expect to have more of an update on blue sky events at the May committee meeting. Lines 29 through 34, tax revenues are still in budget. January results will be received later this month, which should inform us of how we project forecasts in this category for the remainder of the year. Non-operating expenses, line 64, coming in overall under budget by $65,000. One category to note is in Milwaukee, line 49, we are projecting to see an increase in this expense relative to budget as a result of how the fourth quarter tax revenues came in better than expected. This will continue to be a negative variance throughout the year, as was the case in fiscal year 22, which also had a negative variance in this category. Management has no concerns about meeting this obligation, as any material increase in this expense is a direct result of an increase in tax revenues. Overall in January, not really any material deviations from budget that management is concerned about. Page 6 of the packet, you'll see a comparison of the 23 annual budget to the 23 forecast. Based on the results through January and our own analysis of the events calendar and district operations, at this time we see no need for the year-end forecast to deviate substantially from budget, except in 2 categories, which are line 35 interest income and line 49 is Milwaukee expense. In both of these categories, the variance is pretty well locked in, or at least has an established floor. We could see interest income continue to rise relative to budget if the interest rate environment remains robust and the cash flow drawdown schedule for the project allows us to continue to execute our short-term investment strategy. As for visit, the bulk of the variance in this category was set after receiving the December tax revenue results last month. However, part of this expense is also driven by 23 county hotel tax revenues, which are currently projected at budget. Depending on how those numbers actualize, the variance may move modestly from its current position, albeit with less impact than seen from the finalization of the 22 city hotel tax revenues. Overall, for now, we are expecting to be better than budget based on these two category adjustments, and we'll continue to execute on the budget plan and adjust operations accordingly as additional financial results come in. We'll skip over page 7 here. I'm sorry, any questions on those two statements? I'm going to move on to page 8 here. Your packet, and this is the new exhibit that I referenced earlier, which was born out of the discussion had at the January committee meeting regarding the segregation of restricted and unrestricted funds on the income statement. This exhibit is segmented into 2 sections. We'll start with section A first, which is the left-hand side of the page. The individual line items running down the left-hand side here correspond to the line numbers that are in the income statements we just reviewed. The first category in section A is unrestricted cash, and that's expected to produce a net income number of $848,000. As you scan through the line items that make up this category, you'll notice items are added in as well as deducted to get to a number that represents only unrestricted cash. Similar types of puts and takes occur within the second category, restricted revenue, which produces a net loss of $318,000 for the year. And the last category is somewhat of a catch-all that does include the interest income earned on the project proceeds, as well as approximately $17 million in depreciation expense, which is a non-cash item. It's important to note that Section A represents accrual accounting, same as the district's audited financial statements, and consistent with how we customarily report numbers to the committee and the board. Section B, the right-hand side of your document, takes the analysis one step further by incorporating other items from the balance sheet that affect cash balances of each fund, but aren't present on the income statement. The capital expenditure budget of $3 million, which is funded from unrestricted revenues, turns the $848K gain from the income statement into a $2.1 million net outflow of cash. The opposite effect occurs to the restricted fund, where Section B shows a net cash inflow of $3.7 million. The principal difference between the restricted fund numbers in Section A and Section B is the bond interest expense accrued for on the income statement, Section A, and that is greater than the cash going out the door in the form of principal and interest payment, Section B. How's that possible? The first payments on the expansion don't due until 2027. However, we are accruing that interest on our income statement. So Section B is really a better representation of actual cash inflows and outflows. The objective of this exhibit is to provide this committee a deeper level of insight and transparency into how the income statement items are segregated into their relevant funds. Certainly understand that with any new financial exhibit we're presenting here, that there may be questions now or later. Happy to answer any as they come up. Are there any questions on this right now? This is
this is very helpful to me to understand the connection between the income statement and the cash flow, especially with the unrestricted cash and the restricted cash, and how the expansion project has an impact in here too, the breakout. So thank you for that.
sure.
I agree
Okay.
with Scott's statement.
Well, for this committee, we'll continue to provide this exhibit as we update the forecast, so we can continue to monitor it going forward. So,
If I'm not correct me if I'm wrong, but we had discussed limiting the distribution to the finance committee because they're the only ones that have requested it. Is that still the case?
yeah, that's right. Based on sort of the complexity of this document and the questions that we've discussed only in this committee, for now it's in this committee. Certainly if it's requested by governance or the full board, I'm happy to provide it.
Sure.
It's just a level of detail that hasn't historically been needed in those meetings. So pages 9 and 10 are the cash flow documents. Page 9 projects unrestricted cash flow for the remainder of the fiscal year. And looking at the ending net change in cash at the bottom right-hand corner of this document, you can see that the number, the negative 2.2 million, is within 100,000 of the unrestricted change in cash in section B of the document we just reviewed. So these two documents are somewhat linked. There's a couple items that I think are crossing the fiscal years in the cash flow projection. That's why they're not exactly tying out. In page 10, the restricted revenue projection shows the change in cash to be 3.032 million by year end positively, and that is within 600K of that reconciliation exhibit. The primary difference there is that the reconciliation exhibit includes about 600K in interest income that hasn't yet been incorporated into the restricted revenue cash flow projection document. One note on restricted revenue, we did budget to see a $2.3 million increase in this fund. We're projecting to earn about 700K more than that as a result of the November and December tax results, as noted on lines 2 and 3, which came in substantially better than we had budgeted and forecasted for. Pages 11 and 12 represent our capital budget for the year. For now, we continue to forecast our budget. No significant changes or unexpected needs so far this fiscal year. Page 13 is our event mix schedule that we shared with you during the October board meeting and touched on briefly in January. Again, we're still forecasting our budget number of 300 events in 2023.
Sir, can I just one quick question?
Yes.
What happens, I'm not sure, this may be a dumb question, but what happens with our cash? Like, where does it go? Like, where is it invested? Only because I'm thinking about when interest rates were nothing, it didn't matter as long as it was safe.
Right.
But now there's substantial money sitting out there, I suspect.
Yeah, we have limits of where we can put this money. And that's
Yeah, I'm assuming we're not investing it in, like, an olive
Bitcoin
tree
or-
farm. Yeah.
We're pushing crypto.
But I mean, just to maximize the safe return, I mean, you can earn 4 or 5% right now very safely.
Sure. Kyle and I are meeting with John Meehan from R.W. Baird on a regular basis. He's the district's fiduciary financial advisor. And as it pertains to the bond proceeds for the project, we are investing those in short-term treasuries, trying to balance the need to earn that high rate of return, Greg, but then also having enough liquidity for it to go out the door in time. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but we are monitoring that closely. As soon as the security matures, we're meeting with John and then ultimately with our trustee at U.S. Bank to invest those funds in our behalf.
Is there a positive arbitrage right now between what we have to borrow it and what we can invest it in terms of just?
Interest rates for that are going up too, though.
Yeah, the district is subject to, for these bond issues, certain arbitrage, rebate calculations that we've been monitoring with a firm that we call PFM Asset Management. They're out east, and we've been in touch with them as well, based on what you just asked here, Greg. So at this point, we're not in a position to get into any trouble.
Yeah, it's a good question because we're monitoring the same thing. We
Yeah.
have the same issue at the county. I'm sure the city has the same issue too. So we're monitoring that now also, the investment.
We have up until the end of this fiscal year, I think December 15th, which is the 3-year anniversary of our debt issuance, to really maximize that rate of return before it has to be pulled back a little bit to meet those rebate guidelines.
3 years. We do it like last month. Yeah. Like 3 years ago.
So one question, so going back on page 8 and the capital expenditure budget, the $3 million is a decrease to your unrestricted cash. So does that create an issue? I mean, what provides the funding for those capital items in the future? Is it just your operations that provide it?
Yes, that's right. So right now there's a portion of the unrestricted tax revenues that the trustee holds onto and then distributes to us after the board votes to release those funds to us. So that's a little over $1 million. The difference is funded through our general operating accounts.
But $3 million is because of the use of the cash flow. Does that restrict you in the future? I mean, do you have any concerns? I mean,
Oh, I see what you mean.
you have 12.7 million, but is that gonna restrict you in the future of using up?
Thank you, Scott. This is a question that Marty and I were mulling over during the budget process, and knowing that we were gonna have in 2023 a negative cash outflow of $2 million.
Right.
And we accepted that in 23 in part because of the startup expenses that we were incurring for bringing the expansion online, bringing on staff, materials, and otherwise to be prepared for that opening.
Right.
In the later years, in the second half of 24 and 25, we would expect that at a minimum, this looks more like a break-even scenario, not kicking off, even after funding the capital project.
Okay.
We're not seeing any notable increase in revenue to those areas that we have to prepare for and start incurring the expenses for.
Okay.
Primarily wages and startup expenses.
So this goes back to the budget where you put additional items within this year to get ready for the expansion.
Correct.
And this doesn't forebode a issue going into the future that
Correct.
you see.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Page 14 of your packet is the project budget, along with summary numbers of the contracts encumbered by budget category. A key takeaway from this exhibit is that 96% of the overall project budget is under contract, which substantially limits the amount of risk the project faces in regards to price increases. Certainly good news to be in a position of budget stability here. We presented this document at the January board meeting. A couple of these numbers have moved as we've entered into a few more contracts in line 700 and 750. Overall, good place to be in right now. Page 15 is the scheduled cash draws the district expects to make during the remaining time under the project. Not a lot of variation here from the schedule presented in January. This is based on ICON's collaboration with the general contractor and trying to understand what cash flow is coming out of our accounts, and this is something that we pay close attention to when we're making those short-term investments. The next page, page 16, represents a summary schedule of activity occurring in our bonds funds. Again, this is another new exhibit, and again, a request that came out of the January committee meetings. You'll see at the top, the starting balance as of 12/15/20 is $419 million, and that was funded from the bond proceeds from the 2020C and 2020D bond issues. You'll also notice on 8/31/22, the $5 million infusion of funding from Levy, and on 9/30/22, the infusion of funding from the 2022A bonds that were issued this past fall. Also of note is the investment income trickling into the various bond fund accounts as short-term securities mature. Each line item you see here with the descriptor of DR represents a draw request for the project. The last actual draw request received was DR number 28, dated 2/15/23. Each DR thereafter is an estimate and ties back to that schedule from the previous page. This exhibit does tie to our bond statements. Certainly confirmation that monies held in trust are sufficient to meet the ongoing draw requests of the project. I think there was a question of whether we were reconciling some of our draws to our actual bond statements, and this is the work paper that does that for us. Any questions on this exhibit? Mr. Chairman, that is my financial report today.
Any additional questions for Steve?
I have one question.
Yeah.
For the audit, or is the center getting a single audit too this year, or for 22? Because I think we had one for 21, right?
That's right. We did have a single audit for 21. Actually, at this time, I don't believe so. The threshold
The 750.
was 750, and the grants received in 22 were, I think, closer to 400K.
Okay.
So we got underneath that benchmark.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
We would
you.
have liked to have exceeded that benchmark.
Yeah, I'm glad we'll go through a single audit for them more grant revenue, but unfortunately we didn't get there.
Yeah. Okay, just wondering. And in May is it actually, are the financial statements gonna be finalized when they present?
Well, they'll be in draft form.
Oh, and then we approve it, right?
Typically, at the May Finance Committee, we ask the committee to recommend that the full board approve them at the following board meeting. So we'll be doing that. Baker Tilly will be here. Our partner Wendy will walk us all through it.
2 months before the city. I wish we could end in May. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else for Steve? Good. I like the new reports. Those are very helpful. Appreciate it. All right.
Yep.
With that, Marty?
Thank you. Nothing of significance for open session. I will at the board meeting next week give an update to the group on how we're performing on an event standpoint at the theater, Wisconsin Center itself, as far as public and private events in the arena, as well as going through the event bookings, updating what we've booked since our January board meeting, both us and Visit Milwaukee. One of the things that I talked about at the last board meeting was the introduction of the gala giveaway. That is open and running until March 31st as far as accepting applications, and thus far we've had 60 organizations submit interest in doing everything. A lot of attention to this, both from an organization standpoint as well as just bringing additional attention to the expansion and the opportunities that will bring to the community. I indicated last month or 2 months ago that a group of us were going to Boston to spend some time with our colleagues at the Boston Convention Center to get more immersed in what they've done to obtain Safety Act certification for their convention center. They were the first convention center in the country to obtain such certification, and really learn about the systems that they have put in place to screen guests. Unlike the arena and stadium and airport environment, our environment welcomes and invites people to bring in big packages and laptops and computers and all kinds of things. So it's a very different animal as far as how we look to screen for items. And they've got a very good system for screening their attendees. They are currently not screening their employees unless they do so by an event. They screen freight once it's been put on the floor if directed so by the event, but the security that they have in place all the time for every event is security that the guests pass through at designated gates. We do have a budget component in the expansion to provide for a screening system. We're looking at the system that the Boston Convention Center uses. We have not made a decision yet, but it's the direction of the convention center industry is to be more public-facing with screening processes. And in consultation with Megan Setman, our VP of Sales, who's really the face with meeting planners, she's the one who will take the brunt if there are any objections to it. She's extremely supportive of us pursuing the route of screening all attendees, whether it's a public or private event. So more to come on that, but we are working towards creating a more public-facing security entrance protocols when we open the building, and then that would obviously include the south building as well. So more to come on that, but it's a topic that we've been pursuing for months, and are close to making a determination on where we go with that. At the board meeting,
A question on that. Who's demanding or urging us to do this? It's on our own, or
self-imposed. No one is demanding it. We do it at the arena and the theater for all of the events. And from a business standpoint, we think it provides peace of mind for certainly the employees as well as attendees. The system that we're looking for is one of the challenges is the time it takes to put someone through a screening system. And when you've got 5,000 event attendees coming in for a general session, that's been the biggest roadblock, is how do you get all these people in? And we're looking at a system called Evolve that is different than a traditional magnetometer. You pass through posts, but it's able to identify if there is an object that is of possible concern. It identifies on the body of the person, it boxes where that is, so you're able to take that person out of queue and do a further inspection while still putting people through. And you can put multiple people through. It's a much more crowd-friendly screening process. The other nice component about this technology, answering your question more than what you asked, is that as part of the security system, separate from any cameras you may have in the building, this mechanism it takes the digital images of people who have set off the system so that you now have a record. God forbid something should get by, you have more detail about everyone who's coming to your building. It also will enable us, if we go with this system, to have an accurate count of how many people have come into our building. For most conventions, we certainly aren't having a clicker where we're checking the people in, and the events don't have a ticket, so we have no accurate way of knowing exactly how many people came in for the auto show. If it's not ticketed, bad example because the auto show is ticketed. This will give us information that we, up to this point, have not been able to have. It's also able to provide to us in real time what gates are getting hit the hardest. So if we have to employ additional equipment or different manpower, we can do so in a very expeditious manner.
Will this cause the number of entrances to be reduced?
I don't believe so. I mean, it will cause us to catch prohibited items and provide an opportunity for the person to either dispose of it off property or decide not to come in. But we don't see it being a deterrent for people coming in or negatively impacting.
Because in a lot of buildings where these measures are employed, the number of entry points are reduced.
Entry points. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I thought you meant people coming in. I think the plan is to have 10 locations. It will be determined by event activity. If someone's using the 100 meeting complex and that's it, we will probably limit the entrancing to the Valar Phillips and Wisconsin entrance. But we don't really have that many entry points currently. We'll have the 2 skywalks covered, Valar Phillips, Wells, and then 1 to 2 entrances on the expansion side. So really no more restrictive than every exit door isn't an entry point. We have dedicated.
And this sounds expensive, this technology.
It is not free, but it is. We're going to be able to do something if we go this path well within what we had budgeted in the project. There is a line item for this in the project that we had identified 2 years ago.
Okay.
Technology has significantly improved as well as the costs coming down. When we first looked at this technology, Bob, we loved it a year and a half ago. It was only available on an annual lease basis per piece of equipment. And under that model, we were not interested because the reoccurring expense for the software payment. Boston did a good job of beating the daylights out of this vendor and getting them to recognize that in the public sector, the annual lease is not the favored way to go on this. So we're confident that we can get this on a purchase basis within our budget line for security.
There's probably still a maintenance fee though.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
like
much less than the,
Yeah.
well, I mean, the lease payment, it was the lease payment plus maintenance.
Well, it sounds like there's an added component besides the security issue, which is always very important, but it also provides you a lot of data on how people are consuming your product and where they're coming from, and if they're staying at XYZ hotel, then how are they coming into when they use this ballroom, so you know which place is the staff, and it provides a better experience for the people that are consuming the new convention center, which I think is a big value that's probably overlooked, besides the security aspect, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, you are.
Feel free to be more specific about which hotel you think they're staying at.
Well, the one that's connected by a sky bridge.
You mean from the south?
Yes. Right now, there's only one connected by a sky bridge, Greg. And Mike will give an update. Mike Abrams from ICOM will also give an update on not only the overview of the project, where we are, because since January, there have been some incredible completion moments. Just to get a little bit ahead of the game of what Mike's going to talk about, the last pour of concrete for the exhibition hall level was earlier this week, so the entire exhibition hall E is completed. And for the first time, I've been up on the roof of where the ballroom is, and wow, it's It's not finished and it's spectacular, so just you wait and see. So Mike will have that. He's also going to give an update on where we are against our goals for RPP, diversity and minority business participation. We aren't at 100% everywhere yet, but we are really making some significant progress, and I'm very optimistic that you'll be pleased to see how we've developed and how close we are to achieving all of our goals at this point, but still a year to go on the project. So all very positive in that regard. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow, one of our regularly scheduled meetings with Gilbane and C.D. Smith to get a more recent update on where they are with those targets. So in good shape. The last thing that I have to talk about is something that we put on the agenda to go into closed session. So unless there are any other questions about what I've shared already, CEO report is completed.
Any questions on that before we go into our closed session? All right. The committee may enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating specific public business when competitive and bargaining reasons require a closed session. The committee is expected to reconvene into open session at the conclusion of the closed session. Do I have a motion to go to closed session?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of going into closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will go into closed session. Give us a moment to clear the room and shut down what we need to. That's all. I think right now, board meeting agenda review, it's in your packet. Basically very similar to what we've gone through today, and obviously talk about additional opportunities that may come about depending on how things progress. But we'll get an update, I think, from CAA Icon as well with Mike on how the progress is going, as you mentioned, your CEO report, but nothing out of the ordinary. And there, I don't think, is anything to vote on. Is there a vote? Friday? No, no votes.
On Friday, there is.
Potential. There's a
Yeah,
potential vote.
Potentially, yeah.
With that, future meeting dates, Michael, they're in the packet, right? The next one is May, and then we already talked about the audit, so we would love everyone to be there, please.
Yes.
And after that, what's the next one?
October.
October. So we have a
Wow,
great
that's a
long
big
summer ahead of us.
I would just add that if you could put in your calendars, and we'll talk about this next Friday, April 11th or 12th, because we would love you to be a part of
The date will be finalized before the board meeting.
Yeah, okay, good.
Right, so then the October one, though, is also the budget.
Budget.
So those are two, the next two are very important from my aspect.
One thing to note is the meetings after March, they will all be in 201.
Just for emotional and old time's sake, this is the last meeting you'll be attending in this room, because at the end of March, the demolition of the South Administration level begins, so we are all moving over to the second floor of the Miller High Life Theater so we can do the work on this space. So
This space is being, really?
this is becoming back of house support for the staff, break rooms, all these conference spaces to become a training area for staff. You know what? The fact that you're surprised with this tells me we need to give the board an update on what's going on with.
Look at
the-
Scott's, again, surprised.
I didn't know that, so the executive offices are moving to the new
They're
building.
gonna be split because we can't afford, from a space standpoint, we couldn't put everyone over in the north building. We just have too many staff, and so guest services, security, Levy, human resources will be housed here, and all back of house, so housekeeping, setup and cleanup, they're getting much more usable, livable space. The locker rooms are being completely gutted and redone for everyone. To really support the additional staff. Employee entrance is being reformatted. We're gonna have a state-of-the-art security monitoring system as well as an entrancing system. So it'll be much more consistent with buildings that, if you look at if you ever come to the back of the House of the Five-Star Forum, they have a very structured entrancing process. Ours is a little too helter-skelter, and we're readjusting that as part of the expansion.
So take your selfies next week in this room.
Pardon me?
Take your selfie pictures. in this
Yes,
room.
yes. Or you can take it now while you're
You
here,
could.
because usually you don't come here.
No better time than the present. All right, any future discussion items, if you have any, please bring them up now. If not, please send them over, and we will do everything possible to get them on the agenda with the appropriate amount of time and advance notice that we can. I'll give an agenda, how full we are with some agenda items. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
There you go, Greg, you're on the
On the record.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Grady Crosby. Representative Caitlin Haywood. Senator LaTanya Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Jim Cantor.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. First order of business, as usual, is any discussion? And then subsequent approval of the meeting minutes from January 12th of 2003. Do we have any discussion? If not, I would seek a motion for approval.
I'll move it.
Do we have a second?
Second, Senator Johnson.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, next order of business, Mr. Steve Marsh with our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's financial update includes a review of the year-to-date income statement through January, as well as our fiscal year and forecast. We'll also review several financial exhibits pertaining to the expansion project. And just a quick reminder that at our next set of committee and board meetings in May, the 2022 audited financial statements will be presented. As is customary, we'll be seeking from the Finance Committee on May 11th their recommendation that the full board adopt the financial statements at the board meeting on May 19th. And we'll, of course, in the Governance Committee meeting, present the financial statements as well for your review. If there are any questions on the financial statements of the audit, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. So on the financial packet, we'll start with our year-to-date financials as summarized on page 6 and with column IDs A, B, C, and D at the top. Starting with line 65, column C, you can see we exceeded the budget net income number by $529,000. Much of this positive variance is driven by line 35, interest income. Most of the income in this category is a result of earnings on the district's expansion project funds. However, we are also seeing more interest earned from operating accounts and bond trust accounts. Line 28, net operating income, is down relative to budget for January, largely a result of line 18, utilities. You can see there's a sizable variance there, and much of that is driven by an under allocation of expense within our budget for this particular month. This under allocation is offset in latter months. So I would expect to see this variance decrease as we progress throughout the fiscal year. Lines 3 and 4, labor revenue and food and beverage revenue respectively, are down relative to budget. Some of that is a result of actualizing less blue sky events in January than were budgeted. After reviewing the remainder of the event calendar, we do believe there are opportunities later in the year to make that up, provided we can work around planned renovations in the existing building. It's a puzzle we're still putting together and expect to have more of an update on blue sky event activity at the May committee meeting. Lines 29 through 34, tax revenues, are still in that budget. The January results will be received later this month, which will better inform us of how we project forecasts in this category for the remainder of the year. Non-operating expenses, line 64, coming in overall under budget by about $65K. One category to note is in Milwaukee, line 49, we are projecting to see an increase in this expense relative to budget as a result of how the fourth quarter tax revenues came in better than expected. This will continue to be a negative variance throughout the year, as was the case in fiscal year 22, which also had a negative variance in this category. Management has no concerns about meeting this obligation, as any material increase in this expense is a direct result of increase in tax revenues. Overall in January, not really any material deviations from budget that management is concerned about. Page 7 of your packet, you'll see a comparison of the 23 annual budget to the 23 forecast. Based on the results for January and our own analysis of the events calendar and district operations, at this time we see no need for the year-end forecast to deviate substantially from budget, except in 2 categories, and that's line 35, interest income, and line 49, business Milwaukee expense. In both of those categories, the variances are pretty well locked in, or at least have an established floor. We could see interest income continue to rise relative to budget if the interest rate environment remains robust, and the cash flow drawdown schedule for the project allows us to continue to execute our short-term investment strategy. As for visit, the bulk of the variance in this category was set after receiving the December tax revenue results last month. However, part of this expense is also driven by 23 county hotel tax revenues, which are currently projected at budget. Depending on how those numbers actualize, the variance may move modestly from its current position, albeit with less impact than seen in the finalization of the 22 city hotel tax revenues. Overall, for now, we are expecting to be better than budget based on these 2 category adjustments, and we'll continue to execute on the budget plan and adjust operations accordingly as additional financial results come in. Any questions on the income statement? Okay.
Thank you.
Pages 9 and 10 of your packets are the cash flow documents. Page 9, unrestricted cash flow for this fiscal year incorporates the numbers we just reviewed from the income statement. Based on the state of current and projected cash balances, management has no concerns about meeting its operational obligations over the next 12 months. This is very consistent with what we had budgeted for at the beginning of the year. And page 10, the restricted revenue projection shows the change in cash at year end to be $3.032 million positively. We had budgeted to see a $2.3 million increase in this account for fiscal year 23. We're currently projecting to earn about $700,000 more than that as a result of the November and December tax revenue results noted on lines 2 and 3. Those came in substantially better than forecast, so good news so far for this calendar year. Pages 11 and 12 represent our capital budget, and for now we continue to forecast our budget. No significant changes or unexpected needs thus far this year. Page 13 is the event mix schedule that we shared with you during the October board meeting and again in January. We are still forecasting our budget of 300 events in 2023. And page 14, that is the project budget, and along with it includes summary numbers of the contracts encumbered by budget category. A key takeaway from this exhibit is that 96% of the overall project budget is under contract, which substantially limits the amount of risk the project faces in regards to price increases. That is certainly good news to be in a position of budget stability. And lastly, page 15 represents the schedule of cash draws that the district expects to make during the remaining timeline of the project. Not a lot of variation from the schedule presented in January, progressing as we expected to at this point. Mr. Chairman, it's a quick financial report here, but happy to entertain any questions if there are.
Hey, Steve, you covered this, but tell me again what's driving the increased tax revenues?
The increase in the tax revenues?
Yeah.
We were, I would say, a bit conservative in our November and December projections, Brady, and they came in stronger than we had anticipated. A lot of that has to do with the average daily rates that the hotels are able to garner. The occupancy levels, and this was touched on a little bit in January by Megan and Visit Milwaukee, aren't quite what they were in 2019, which I think is good news because that means there's opportunity to see these revenues increase even more. So what we aren't seeing on the occupancy side, we're making up for on the ADR side as well.
Thank you.
I'd just like to bring attention to one of the things that Steve's covered. And we've been very fortunate in that we're extremely conservative in projecting the amount of interest income that the bonds would realize for us. And as you can see with Steve's breakdown of the contract, percent of the budget committed, you can see that we've only put out $171 million and we're halfway through the project. So the fact that we've not had to release those funds from our account have enabled us to really drive this interest income far higher than we had expected. We thought we would have had more cash out the door than we currently have. So we're holding it longer at higher interest rates, really driving the interest income, all of which has to go towards the project.
That's right.
Questions? All right. Marty, turn it over to you for your CEO report.
Thank you. I'm brief for this meeting. What I plan to talk about at the full board meeting next week is fairly consistent with past reports. I'm going to give an update on the event activity in the theater, the Wisconsin Center, and the arena, talk about the bookings that we have added since our January board meeting for balance of 23 and the years to come. One of the notes that I had shared last meeting with the board was the introduction of the gala giveaway. Through today, and I'm sure it will change over the next week, we've had 60 organizations submit applications for consideration for the gala giveaway, far beyond what I had thought we would get. So we're really excited about the not only the participation, but the awareness that our organization and the expansion are getting through this promotion. Shared with the board in January that we were planning a road trip, a group of us on the operations side, to take a look at how the Boston Convention Center runs its facilities, specifically on the security side, focusing primarily on front of house, the guest entrancing experience, because as you can appreciate, unlike arenas, stadiums, they want people to come in, but they limit the size bag you can bring, as do we with the Panther Arena. And the convention center, we encourage people to bring laptops, multiple cell phones, suitcases in for many events, so that they can drop them off, then have them here to pick up when they go to the airport. So it's a little bit different than the arena and stadium. And the Boston Convention Center really has been the leading facility in getting Safety Act certified, something that we're certainly going to be looking at. But more importantly, we just wanted to get familiar with their entrancing process and learned a lot. And we're hopeful that within the expansion and then the South Building, we'll be integrating a very user-friendly, guest-friendly series of screening services, but yet not impact the way people come into our building. So more to come on that. At the meeting next week, Mike Abrams will be here giving an update to the group on where we are with the expansion, an update on where we are with RPP, minority business participation, diversity participation, all of which we have really made significant inroads in not just achieving, but in many cases surpassing our goals for the projects. You'll hear about that in detail next week. So that's really the overview of the CEO report, what I'm going to give next week. And the one thing I would like to talk about really is tied to a closed session. So if there's any questions for what I've talked about, happy to address them. Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, I'm done with the CEO report overview.
Anything prior to going into closed? Okay. The committee may enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating specified public business when competitive and bargaining reasons require a closed session. The committee is expected to reconvene in open session at the conclusion of the closed session. I'd like to entertain a motion to go to closed session.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor of going to closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will now move to go into closed session, and we will wait to clear the room for a minute.
Ask Representative Hayward how close.
All right, the only few items left are just the future board meeting agenda review for next week. Basically, very similar to what we had this today. We potentially will have something to vote on, not this tomorrow Friday, next Friday at the board meeting. So please be apprised of that. Other than that, we'll also get an update from Mike Abrams with CAA icon.
Say that fast.
CAA icon, I did, and they messed it up. CAA icon to just give us progress report against how we're doing against all our measurables, as well as how we're tracking for the expansion. Any other future committee discussion items? As always, please bring up now. If not, send us an email, give us a call. We'll try to make sure that we fit it in as best as we can with the appropriate amount of time on agendas. Obviously, we have to submit those in advance, so if it's something the day before, that would be kind of hard for us. But if you have something, we'll certainly do our best to work it in and make it work out. Future meeting dates as well. The next meetings will be in May. We'll go over the audit report, so hopefully everyone will be able to be there for that. And then we also will have a little bit of a hiatus until October from there. So that is our budget review process. So please make sure you mark those on your calendar and are here to vote on those things. With that, if there aren't any other questions, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is always in order. I'll move it.
Yeah, well, Kayla's got a mouthful of food, so we gotta wait. We got two people.
He raised his hand.
Definitely second. I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grady.
See you guys.
Will you be here next?
No, I'm in Florida, but I'll be here virtually.
Bert, great. Thank you.